right. So I need to minimize you guys. All right. So thank you so much. I've got between 10 and 15 minutes. First of all, thank you for the invite. By the way, the title is Do We Still Need Standards Today? And we decided on the topic months and months ago. And since then, I thought a lot about it, and I came to the conclusion this is really the wrong title for this presentation. And maybe this talk should really be about what my talk title should really be about. Confused yet? So before I confuse you, I think, anymore, let me tell you about myself so you see who you're dealing with here. Undergrad in computer software engineering, got super lucky to go to MIT to study this thing called GIS. I had no clue what it was about, but it changed my life. Ended up supporting NASA on access to Earth science information via OGC standards, which led me straight to OGC. I ran their innovation program. I call it the fun part of OGC. It's an amazing collaborative research and development program exploring new standards, new applications, new technologies, new everything. And I love a challenge. To follow my dreams, I guess, I left OGC to run a little startup in aviation because I knew absolutely nothing about aviation. But it ended up being all about how do you exchange aeronautical, so airport maps and airspace configuration, weather, and flight information across airlines and countries. And then I said to myself, I want to give a large business a try. So I went to Northrop Grumman and worked as their innovation architect across all the different sectors and all the different divisions. And about a couple of years ago, I came back to OGC. And if you're like any of my friends and family, everybody's like, why? Who goes back, essentially, who goes back to, a job or an organization they were at before? So I want to tell you why, and then you'll see, we're trying to figure out together what the talk should be, remember? So why? Here are a couple of examples. So did you know back in 2018, 2019, SpaceX, in the US airspace would close for 3 hours, 1,300 miles of airspace every time a SpaceX rocket launched. They closed the airspace for 3 hours, even though the rocket was out of the airspace in 90 seconds before the booster came back 8 minutes later. And 3 hours versus 8 minutes versus 90 seconds. Did you know also that in 2018, because of the SpaceX flights, so the new space, 1,400 flights were affected and they had to fly 70,000 extra miles. So imagine fuel cost and, not too many happy passengers for airlines. But do you know why all of this was happening? Because in 2018-19, so that's not long ago, there was no way to actually exchange location and other parameters information between the SpaceX and the launch mechanisms and the US airspace traffic management system. Very simple problem. Speaking of space though, I'm sure, I see you guys active on Twitter. So this tweet last week, as of, January 2021, there were 3,000 active satellites out there in space. Some of them small sats, whose number is really growing very fast. I think, what did they say? 2019 versus 2020, there were 385 small sats and versus 1,000. So it was already 3 times as much in 2020. And many of these satellites are collecting Earth observation, right? Terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of information that's useful to so many applications. so many domains, so many entrepreneurs, so many startups hungry to use this data and combine them in new and old ways, right? For business opportunities to create markets. Back to Earth from space, where I came from because I did a lot in aviation, the unmanned or unstaffed aerial vehicles, the drones, right? The drones and the flying taxis. This is just a number here again in the US, almost 1 million in the US per the FAA numbers. But this is creating a whole new domain of traffic management for the drones, where location is so critical for safety and for reliability. You really don't want your medicine or your Amazon packages or your flying cab to bump into anything or just fall out of the sky. You want more scale. I don't think anybody here has not heard of Internet of Things. Your phone, my phone, his Alexa, her thermostat. This number here for Gartner for 2020, 5.81 billion, again, billion in 2020 devices that we're trying to connect to each other, and we're trying to also manage sometimes from our phone. Smart cities is another example that inspires me. Digital twins, this concept of being able to connect all sorts of information around the city. So retail, real estate, health, infrastructure, government, energy, transportation, underground, all of this, so we can, how can I say this, gamify city planning. So just like these guys here on the screen are doing. Ooh, what if I put more trash cans here? What if I plant more trees? What if I have more energy? What if I, change my subway configuration, put more roads, on and on. So it's, again, it's all around where do I do things and what's the impact. And we have to talk about this. I know everybody's sick of the, the COVID virus and the pandemics. But to me, what was mind blowing is I swear it feels like there are millions of these dashboards out there. And there's even a rating. You can rate from best to worst by the MIT Tech Review. But the issue number one that we have seen within OGC is anybody who's putting up these dashboards is connecting to the data sources behind the scenes. The interfaces are changing, the data sources are changing, the semantics are not the same, the frequency of update, everything is ad hoc in the back end, or interoperability is totally lacking. So honestly, that's why, when I looked back at my talk, it was like, do we need standards for any of these examples that I mentioned? Is this really the right question to ask? Standards are just a means to an end. So I thought, shouldn't we be asking, for example, don't we need systems to talk to each other around location? Don't we need organizations to share data around location as the organizing principle of all data? My answer to these questions is yes. I think it's a big yes, but most importantly, I don't care about any of this. Don't we want to solve our own problems, our society's problems, our world's problems that are getting more complex? Pandemics, climate change, you name it. So I say it's a big yes. So what does that mean for standards? Instead, do we need standards? Do we not need them? So what does that mean? And I'm fascinated by this because I'm seeing right now that what we're standardizing, but more importantly, how we're standardizing is different. We're doing less standardizing the established ways and more collaborating on baselines on which innovation can thrive. We're all being more proactive. We're all being driven by community engagement early on. And what's bubbling up is less standards development per the traditional definition and more, I call it, integrated innovation approach. So how do we do this? Think about those examples, whether we're sharing location to your mobile device, whether we're connecting to the Internet of Things, so we can manage multiple devices within, in one interface. How do we specify the corridors and the locations for the drones and GeoJSON or whatever you want to use? How do we do APIs on top of our data? How do we model the data behind the APIs so we're speaking the same language? How do we do all this Earth observation, spatial, temporal data? How do we create analysis-ready data, ARD? And this is what we're standardizing today is totally different what we've done in the past, and the way we're doing it is totally different. And it's all driven by this amazing changing environment and the changing players, I think, at the same time. And I think that's why, honestly, I'm back at OGC. I'm here trying to build with folks like you. I love that we're doing this virtually, the future of location, the future of mapping, the future of geospatial. And I hope you see that I'm not crazy after all. So OGC to me is not just about standards, it's about innovation. It's not about location, it's about everything that's location driven. And we're trying to make that location findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. So I hope I gave you a sense of, what drives me and why we're talking standards and what OGC is and why I'm here in the first place. I have a few slides that I think, you can browse at your own leisure. And we have, I think, a few minutes for questions. Works?
Yes, thank you very much, Nadine. So the first question, so OGC is an organization, is for individuals, it's for companies, or so how do we become members or what? Or what is the process?
So OGC is a consortium. So we're about 540 member organizations. So it's mostly organizations. I have some of the top level members on my board. So governments like, the NASA, the NOAA, the UK Met Office, the Ordnance Survey, the Hydrographic Office in Canada, same thing. And you have the Google, Microsoft, Intel, Apple, HP, of course, Esri, Hexagon, Oracle. So all of these are also OGC members. And my favorite, if I can say this, is we're seeing, I mentioned, like the innovation is coming from those startups. So you're seeing, I love this. I love when we have people that we've never heard of that are coming and actually being curious on how they can use location in their businesses. So we have many of those. And of course, research and academia is always there because we're always going forward. We do have individuals as well. Again, this is, I think, one of my, I've been at OGC for 2 years, so we're trying to do all of our standards developer friendly. So we want to engage the developers. So you see the thinking it's a little bit changing. It's not just top down, from the Google down, it's actually bottom up from the developers all the way up. And OGC becomes everything in between.
Okay, thanks very much, Nadine. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.